For one interested in following a spiritual path, a proper teacher is something of fundamental importance. Although one can learn many things about laws or medicine by reading books or watching YouTube videos, still he has to go to a university and study under the supervision of different teachers to be recognized as a qualified doctor or lawyer. Similarly, one can advance to a certain extent in the spiritual path just by reading books or watching seminars, but someone that is really serious about attaining the ultimate goal will benefit greatly by joining a bona fide spiritual line and training under the guidance of a spiritual master. Apart from the main teacher, the Diksha Guru, who takes formal responsibility for the spiritual well-being of the disciple, one can also learn from different teachers called Siksha Gurus. The spiritual teacher has the mission of not only teaching but especially to observe and correct his disciples, allowing them to grow. To humbly accept chastisement and to acknowledge one's own faults is a difficult process to follow, but anyone that is sincere in the spiritual path must accept it. This is a process that was ultimately created by Krishna himself to rectify the consciousness of conditioned souls. In the Mahabharata, there is the story of Ekalavya, an interesting passage in this connection that explains about the connection between a guru and a disciple. In popular Indian culture, Ekalavya is usually revered as the example of the disciple who was faithful enough to sacrifice his own tomb for the spiritual master. However, a deeper meaning was explained by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur in his article Upakyani Upadesha, translated to English by Srila Bhakticharu Swami and also explained in the book Spiritual Connection by Srila Bhaktidhira Damodara Swami. Once, on the order of Dronacharya, their martial teacher, both the Kauravas and the Pandavas went to the forest to hunt. At these times, Kshatras had the duty of going periodically to the forest to hunt for tigers and other dangerous animals, to reduce their populations and thus prevent attacks on innocent people. Soon, they found a scared dog and were astonished to find that 7 arrows had been shot into the dog's mouth simultaneously when he had opened it to bark. The arrows landed in such a way that they obstructed the mouth of the dog without hurting him. By the almost superhumanly skillful way the arrows were shot, they could understand that the archer who did that was even more skilled than any of the Pandavas. Shocked to find about the existence of such a gifted archer, they set out to find him. After searching for some time, they discovered that the boy who had performed this feat was Ekalavya, the son of Hiranyandanura, and that he had developed his extraordinary skill by making and worshipping an idol of Dronacharya. Without the knowledge of the teacher, Ekalavya had developed this irregular form of worship to absorb the talents of Dronacharya by supernatural means, without his knowledge. Since he was not doing anything else apart from practicing, he became even more gifted than any of Dronacharya's other students. The Pandavas returned to their capital and informed Dronacharya of this amazing incident. In a humble mood, Arjuna informed Dronacharya of the fact that the Acharya had one disciple more skilled in the art of archery than he. The Acharya listened to these words in shock. At once he returned to the forest with Arjuna and came upon Ekalavya, who was fully absorbed in practicing archery as he let loose dense volleys of arrows, one after the other. When Dronacharya approached, Ekalavya suddenly saw the Acharya standing directly before him. The young archer immediately paid his respects, introduced himself as one of his disciples, and stood submissively with folded hands. Dronacharya addressed Ekalavya, "You must offer me Guru Dakshina." Ekalavya replied, "Wherever you order, I am prepared to give." Dronacharya then told Ekalavya to sever his right thumb and give it as a dakshina, and he followed the order without any objection. At first, it looks like Ekalavya was the perfect disciple and Arjuna was envious of him, but the real meaning is the opposite. Ekalavya was a member of the Nishada tribe. Not only did he lack the proper moral qualifications, but he was also envious of the Pandavas, being a member of a tribe that was a sworn enemy of the Kuru dynasty. When he previously approached Dronacharya wanting to learn military science, Drona could read perfectly his mentality and thus he flatly rejected, seeing that whatever he would teach him would just increase his pride and would ultimately be used against his other disciples. At this point, Ekalavya had three options. 1. To act like a bona fide disciple, accept the order of the Guru and just go home. 2. To learn from someone else. 3. To try to reform himself so he could become qualified to be taught by Dronacharya. Instead, he concocted a method of worship with the goal of stealing the military knowledge from Dronacharya. His worship was thus not based on love and submission but on pride. When Arjuna saw the situation, he was alarmed that the good name of Dronacharya could be dishonored by such a person. He thus called Dronacharya, who solved the situation by taking the thumb of Ekalavya. At the time, archers would hold the arrow using the thumb and the index finger. Thus, by losing his thumb, Ekalavya's talent became useless. In this way, Dronacharya nullified what Ekalavya had stolen from him. Still, one could argue that Ekalavya should be given credit by his incredible sacrifice in offering his thumb to Dronacharya, but even this was not done with the proper consciousness. On the opposite, he just acted out of pride, out of the fear of losing his reputation by breaking his word, something that was considered very important at the time. In other words, he decided to cut his thumb out of mundane considerations, evaluating that to keep his pride was more important than keeping his finger, just as other kshatras did so many things out of pride through history. Understanding his mentality, Dronacharya asked his thumb as a dakshina in order to quickly solve the problem. After these incidents, Ekalavya continued to train in the forest and shoot arrows using his other fingers, but without his thumb, he was not nearly as good as before, and therefore he stopped being a threat to the Pandavas and other disciples of Dronacharya. This was actually fortunate because his envious mentality never changed. This story teaches us that one should approach a spiritual teacher with sincerity, with the goal of improving oneself, and not with just the goal of using him as a ladder to attain some purpose. In India, it's common for proponents of the Mayavada philosophy to consider the Guru as a simple tool that is necessary to reach a goal. When the goal is reached, they conclude that the Guru is not needed anymore and send him away. Such an exploitative relationship can hardly be favorable for one's advancement in the spiritual path.